Hi, Eddie Troxler here. This is my third episode of Jazz Chat. Still working on the website, jazzchat.org. I do have the domain, so if there's any viewers out there that would maybe that are really good at that, it would be even better if you would like to trade for music lessons or equipment too. Today I have my good friend Joe Wright, who is a tuba player. And so generally what we do, we choose a public domain jazz standard. We play through it a few times and we talk about it. So we'll jump right in, and then we'll do some introduction. I'll introduce you to Joe, and we'll talk about, how we got into this. Today we chose Bye Bye Blackbird. I think it was written in 1926, but it's been covered by a lot of different people. And if you want to learn this, well, eventually I'll have the PDF on there, but you can find the PDF quite easily. There's a lot of different versions. We're doing it in F, which is probably the most standard key. I think Miles Davis does it in that key and a couple of other people. But anyway, we'll jump right in and we'll talk about it after that. So. Cool. All right. That was Bye Bye Blackbird. Like I say, I'm Eddie Troxler, and I have Joe Wright on the big tuba there. So for me, tuba, euphonium, there's baritone, there's a couple of those instruments they're different sizes.
What kind of big family of tubas? Yeah.
Yeah, that's euphonium is a smaller one, right?
Right. Yeah,
Like
euphonium's typically about half the size of a bass tuba. They come in all different shapes and pitches. This is a C bass tuba.
Oh yeah,
And so the overtone series as this blows over with no valves is the C. And depending on how big it is, basically the length of the horn determines that. And kids in schools are typically playing B flat tubas, which are a little longer than this, but they make F, they make E flat, and then the B flat above that, that's the euphonium.
Cool. Yeah. And we're both educators, and so you've always played music. You chose music in like elementary school.
Yeah, real early on. I started off on piano.
Yeah,
and it was kind of my first instrument, and then moved into brass, and little by little throughout like middle school evolved from trumpet down to tuba, and it's been tuba pretty much since high school. Yeah.
Yeah. Except for carrying it around. But yeah, and for me too, I think that era, most people, their parents put them in piano lessons, and I played piano, but I don't think I learned that much. They would teach us pieces for the recital, and we would, I remember I would play Christmas songs and stuff, but I would just play them by ear, and I would kind of refuse to read the music, even though I would act like I was reading it. But I think the teacher caught on.
I had one of those teachers you couldn't put anything past, and which was good for me at the time. So I was learning how to legitimately play and read and use proper technique. All at the same time, I was doing what you were doing. I was playing by ear, and I'm glad I have both skills. But
same here, and I encourage my students. Everybody wants to bring up, so and so that didn't really like, there's Wes Montgomery or people like that. But for me, to be able to work and teach as a musician, it's because I can read. There's a lot of great players that don't read, and I think me and Eric were talking last week. You process the information different.
Right.
For example, if you had no way of reading or writing, you would have to memorize, everybody's phone number, everything else, because you want to be able to read it.
Yeah.
So the same with music, but I think it's the language that we talk about music, and the more you can learn about it. And I remember when I first got to Berkeley, my private teacher called me into his office. He said, well, let's jam a while. And he said, whatever you learn here, don't lose that ability to just be able to play. And I think in the jazz world, we talk a lot about live jazz. You have this communication thing that's going on. And we were talking earlier, it's not something, for me, that came overnight. It's more just years and years of doing it and playing blues. And, I first studied piano, then I played alto sax in middle school, but then that didn't last too long because I thought we could only take one elective, and I thought the cool guys were taking the shop class. So so I told my parents I was going to quit band. But then I think my brother got a guitar, and I started playing it all the time. And I said, well, this is cool. I could play rock and roll, because I wasn't really good in sports, and I wasn't one of the really smart kids. So it gave me something that I could make myself better at. And I did. I practiced. I would get up in the mornings, practice before school. And I still practice. I'm not in school, but I try to practice in the mornings. So it's a good habit to get into. So anyway, bye Blackbird. It's a fairly straightforward song. You know, a lot of jazz tunes. It's really similar. I kind of think about a lot of these songs in increments of 4 measures. You know,
Sure.
4/8. Most of them are 32 bar. This is a 32 bar tune. So we have that first part. Well, actually, I introed it. I did, and we did talk about that a little bit, but not so much. If you would go to a jazz jam, this is kind of jazz slang. We might say, "All right, I'll set it up. You know, we'll take the head in. You know, we'll each take you take the head out." What that means for those of you who don't know, and if you start going to some open jazz jams, there's one at the Boulder with my old band host. I think they'll be there next week. I'll be on another gig. So if you're a Fitchburg resident, next Thursday, I'm pretty sure check with the Boulder Cafe, but they host that an open jazz jam. And if you go in with a song, I think, say if you went in with Bye Bye Blackbird, you really should know that song, you know, because if you're and have if it's something that they might not know, you know, bring some charts or something, you know, because I think my father told me at a really young age, you know, a good retreat's better than a bad stand. So, so I keep that in mind. I don't want to jump into some tune that I don't really know and have to stop right in the middle. But Bye Bye Blackbird's a good one. It's a good beginner jazz tune. It pretty much stays in the key of F. You know, it slightly goes out of it, not so much. You know, when you're on the bridge, it shows an A7, which would have an E flat, but it doesn't really matter. You just kind of be careful. And when I do, I kind of, not that I'm doing a chord solo, but if I have practiced that way, I can kind of get some double stops in there. You know what I mean? If that's an F major 7th, really, and I try to put my melody on the top of the chord. I try to encourage people to learn to build their own chords rather than, I see a lot of posts and stuff about these chord pictures for certain songs, but really, if you watch people play, they don't really use those. It's not like people look them up in the Mel Bay chord book. You just learn to. So I could play the F there, you know, for that part, and then I have that B flat, and then I could go to the plain old cowboy F to have that next F in my melody, and that's what I'm doing. I'm just voicing it where I can put that up top. Then and we were talking earlier too that some of these charts are a little different, but it's pretty much the same harmony going on. It shows an A flat diminished, which is really an approach to the 2/5. To me, you know, you're just kind of diminished chords are generally used as passing chords, or you know.
Right. I think in this tune, you know, you get the. You're talking about the A flat diminished. Then on the third line, and of the head, mm-hmm. You know, it's got the G minor major 7, G minor 7, G6. You just got that little chromatic line. It's outlining.
Yeah, that's an inside line,
right?
And mine doesn't even have that. So
it doesn't. Yeah.
So that's maybe someone's substitution. I don't know if that's the Miles version. Maybe a lot of those real book tunes are the.
Right. A couple of the popular big band charts, they do that too.
This one just stays on the G minor.
Right.
And that, so, you know, if I have a good bass player, and this is not something I learned in one night either, like I could just, I practiced my triads, right, in all 12 keys, and I did that from Berklee courses, you know, so mainly on the high 3 strings. So if he's playing that G bass note, I can just play a B flat triad right there,
right,
you know, that's my G minor, you know. I usually think if I go from the third, well, the minors become majors and majors become minors, and that's and I think Joe Pass was one of the most amazing guitar players of our time as far as the jazz stuff. He said it doesn't really matter. It's just whether it's major or minor. That's that's what he thought about. So you don't really need all these books. You just learn to build these chords yourself. Because really, playing the tune, especially if you're at the jazz jam or something, and there's like 3 or 4 horn players, they're all taking solos. I kind of get bored playing the chords the same all the time, so I'll switch them up, or also depending on who's in the band, when I play with a piano player, I'm going to choose different voicings because we'll step on top of each other. It's kind of hard if you have more than one person trying to comp at the same time. So to me, I was taught comping should mean to make the soloist sound better. That's my goal to complement the soloist. So I don't want to be over there, covering you up, So yeah, that then like a lot of tunes, it has a bridge and it goes back to the original A. So we have the A section, and then it just kind of goes up a half step. It goes up a half step for the first note, but then it's a whole step up. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit. And then we're into that F7 with a C in the melody. So I know that shape. The G, I can just go back to that B flat triad, And like I say, especially if I have a bass, I don't really need to play those. A good bass player would probably prefer I don't play the roots. So just kind of understanding that, and you don't need a chord for every note for sure. But I think the bottom line is you've got to practice it a lot. Listen to a bunch of different versions, and this melody, I think of it as more of a guide. Probably one of my more favorite versions is the Miles version, but and it's an all-star cast on that. It's like Coltrane's on there. It's Chambers. Is Garland on piano, or I think it's Red Garland on piano. But anyway, they're all kind of doing their own thing, and it works. And Miles does the head, but he's a little slightly behind, which he did that a lot. Slightly behind the beat. He's not, right on the downbeat. And then he's throwing in all these embellishments along with it. So that just takes, transcribing years of doing it. I just listened to that version this morning on the very last part, the 2/5, which if you don't know what 2/5s are, you got to practice those in all 12 keys if you want to play jazz.
Right.
There's so many 2/5s. There's a 2/5 at the end, G minor 7, C7, F. What Miles did, he did like an arpeggio. Obviously, horn players can't play chords, but they do arpeggios. I think he did something like, did like a minor ninth arpeggio right at the end, and that kind of brought him into a solo. So that would be... then he's into his solos, but it was kind of a cool lick that I'll try to bring into some other tunes.
So one of the cool parts, playing the bass part on tuba or playing jazz tuba in general is you kind of get to toggle back and forth between, the bass player has a role and then a horn player has a role. And, I learned to play bass by trying to play an entire jazz ensemble by myself on piano. And so I got my left hand learning how to play the bass and learning how to play something other than just the roots, how to walk, how to go from one chord tone to another, what was a passing tone, what was, why was I doing this, what was a neighbor, et cetera. And so I think about that a lot. Like, say, the first time through the tune, that's pretty much the first thing I was doing is just making sure we're together and I'm hitting the roots and making sure you hear them and that you know where I am. Second time through, when you're soloing, I was trying to serve the music by actually turning bass parts into lines.
Yeah.
And doing that. Third time through, when I was improvising, I was worried less about whether or not I was hitting roots, you know, that I was trying to play a line, that I was trying to play, you know, improvise a melody. And the audience now can hear the roots. They can, you know, they can hear them in your comping, even if you're not always hitting the root on the bottom voice. It's not so important now that we've had 2 times through the tune. And then, of course, I got to steal a melody from you on the last time.
Oh, yeah, no, that was good. That was great. And that's a standard way of doing a tune like this. I generally don't want to make them too long, but like I say, if you go to one of those jazz jams, if there's a lot of horn players, they're going to all want to take, they'll take 2 choruses each, and it's like, and as a rhythm guitarist, you know, it's a little, all right, you know, but it's still a learning process. I think I learned more from just playing than a lot of, I mean, it takes a lot of everything, but put time into. And but your background, were you classical trained mostly? Or was it like?
Classically trained, yes. I think any lessons I was taking from anybody were from people who had a classical background for the most part.
So at BU, your degree is from BU.
It was music education, but but actually, my teacher at BU was very much interested in sort of forwarding the role of tuba in jazz.
Oh, cool.
Sam Palafian was his name, and he had just recorded his first jazz album with this guitarist named Frank Vignola called Traveling
White.
White.
Frank. Yeah, I followed Frank for a while.
Yeah.
I saw him the first time with Les Paul. We used to take those Chinatown buses over from Berkeley, the Iridium, and Frank, I mean, he's got that Django style down. Right. He's got, but he plays swing and all that stuff too. And he's a great player.
So I listened to Sam a lot, both in person and in his recordings, and listening to how he because his background was absolutely classical, but he just loved playing jazz, and his work with the Empire Brass Quintet definitely brought him through a whole bunch of different genres, and it was, he took his beautiful sound and his training on the instrument and really made it work in jazz. And so that definitely sort of, at the very least, sort of empowered me to say, the tuba player can play a lot of jazz. As of late, you're starting to see it pop more into, the jazz and rock vein with like the roots and everything. You're starting to see sousaphones and the whole second line resurgence.
Yeah, the whole like New Orleans thing, with that was more generally tuba, banjo, whatever.
Right. Which is authentic early jazz, but when jazz started hitting the concert halls as opposed to the gin joints, the tuba didn't make as much sense or whatever, and it didn't kind of, almost, and weirdly kind of like the clarinet. I mean, the clarinet was a huge jazz instrument up until about the middle of the 20th century, and then kids are wondering why the school jazz bands won't let them play clarinet, and then they all can point to icons of jazz that played clarinet, and I like to think that's that they're now feeling empowered and entitled to do that.
Yeah, I would rather stand next to a clarinet player than a sax player. I know sax has become more, but if you're playing for a few hours, it's.
I don't think I can take that stand in my household, Eddie.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. Well, your wife's mostly, and for me too, I was originally when I decided to study music formally guitar. It was classical guitar. That's all they offered in North Carolina. So I assumed I would go to UNCG or something, which offered classical. So I would learn these classical pieces, but it's note for note, and it takes a lot of practice, and you play them, and there was North Carolina School of the Arts too, which I studied with some of those teachers from there.
Right.
And that was Aaron Shearer. He wrote a lot of books on guitar methods, but mostly diehard classical. Then I get to Berkeley, and they're like, no, you can play classical on a Telecaster. We don't care, so you can use a pick if you want. Okay, because they classical guitar, the technique is you have to use a footstool, put it on your left leg, and you use your nails, and you got to sit straight. They were always straightening me up and everything, but I'm glad I did.
Right.
Start with that discipline of learning pieces that style, because you can approach a jazz piece that way too. It's just that I think once you get it, you want to be able to do your own thing on it. And I'm not really a singer, but knowing the words or some of the words, it kind of helps the way I would kind of phrase it. Pack up all your cares and woes, here I go, singing low. Because, just what's written, I don't think that would mean very much to my audience.
Sure, rhythmically, it's important. Yeah, I don't think I followed your written rhythm.
Yeah, and we last week we talked a little bit about swing.
Yeah.
Most jazz do a large amount of swing, which is, to me, you take triplets and you cross out the middle one. You'll hear blues players, they'll do all the triplets, and then they'll cross out the middle.
Right.
But I just think of that. But everybody in the band's going to be swinging, so you just get used to playing that swing. So it has to do with the eighth notes. In jazz, the only other thing you encounter a lot of Latin pieces that are not swinging. They're mostly a dotted quarter followed by an eighth. So which is a different groove. We just lost a really great piano player yesterday, Palmieri. Did you know?
I saw that.
I saw that.
Yep.
I used to always listen to Latin jazz on public radio.
Yeah.
But we have about 3 minutes. You think we should play another time through?
Sure.
Or,
yeah.
What do you want to do? We'll just. I'll take the head in. You can take it out, right?
Sure.
You want to do any solos?
I'll noodle around in the head. How's that? Sounds we'll do it 2 times through, and
so I'm taking it in. You're taking it out.
Sounds great.
All right. Cool.
Yep.
We'll do it right on top this time.
Yep.
2. Cool.
Yeah, man.
Thanks so much for watching. Be back next week with a different guest, or maybe solo if I can't find anyone. Thank you for watching. Be nice with your comments. Take care.